Welcome to Night Whispers, your place for soothing but chilling bedtime horror stories designed to help you fall asleep while listening to something haunting. Tonight's tale is The Midnight Motel, a story about a traveler who stumbles upon a roadside inn that shouldn't exist, at least, not anymore. Locals whisper that it burned down decades ago, yet some still see its neon sign flickering in the storm. Would you dare check in? The desert highway stretched endlessly, a ribbon of cracked asphalt shimmering under the pale moonlight. For miles, nothing moved except the whisper of sand dragged by the wind. Jacob Harding kept his eyes fixed on the road, hands gripping the wheel tighter than he realized. His gas gauge was sinking dangerously close to empty, and the next town was still an hour away, at least according to the outdated GPS clipped to his dashboard. That's when he saw it, that a flickering neon sign in the distance. Vacancy. The letters buzzed weakly, one or two dying with every other pulse. Below it, the name was scrawled in chipped paint, The Midnight Motel. Jacob felt a rush of relief. The last 40 miles had been nothing but scrubland and silence, and the idea of a bed, any bed, sounded like salvation. He slowed, turning into the gravel lot. The headlights cut across a row of tired, one-story rooms. Their doors were painted a dull green, each with a brass number hanging crookedly on rusted nails. The office stood at the far end. Its blinds were drawn, but a dim light glowed inside. Jacob parked near the door, shut off the car, and stepped out. The desert air was cooler now, the kind that carried a bite sharp enough to raise goosebumps. When he pushed open the office door, a bell above jingled, though the sound seemed muffled, as if swallowed by the room. A woman sat behind the counter, her hair pinned in a style that belonged to another decade. Her lipstick was too red, too sharp against her pale face. "Checking in?" she asked, voice calm but strangely rehearsed. "Yeah," Jacob said, pulling out his wallet. "One night. Just passing through." She slid a yellowed ledger across the counter. Not a computer, not even a cash register, just that old, stained book. He hesitated before scrawling his name. The pen dragged like it had been used too long. "Room 7, she said, handing him a tarnished key with a plastic tag dangling from it. "Checkout's at sunrise." Jacob frowned. "Sunrise? That's early." Her smile didn't falter. "We find our guests prefer not to linger." The way she said it made his stomach twist. But exhaustion won. He took the key, muttered a thanks, and stepped back into the night. Room 7 sat in the middle of the row. The gravel crunched under his shoes as he approached, and for a moment he felt eyes on him, though no one was outside. The curtains of other rooms seemed to shift as if someone had just let them fall back into place. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of mildew, mixed with something metallic he couldn't quite place. The bedspread was patterned in faded flowers, the kind that might have been cheerful once but now only felt depressing. A single lamp buzzed weakly in the corner, casting yellow light that pooled more than it spread. That he dropped his bag by the chair and sat on the edge of the bed. The springs groaned under his weight. For a moment, he stared at the wall where a framed print of a desert sunset hung crookedly. The silence pressed down heavy, broken only by the faint hum of the neon sign outside. Jacob leaned back, telling himself that sleep was all he needed. Just a few hours, then he'd be back on the road, the motel nothing but a memory. He reached to switch off the lamp, when a knock came at the door that it wasn't loud. Just 3 soft taps that he froze. Who the hell would be knocking at this hour? He glanced at his watch, 1:17 a.m. The knock came again. This time, slower, Jacob stood, every instinct telling him not to answer. But curiosity was stronger. He stepped toward the door, pressing his eye to the peephole. The hallway outside was empty. No footsteps, no shadows. Just stillness that he exhaled, shaking his head. Maybe it was the wind, rattling something against the door. He turned away, but the moment he reached the bed again, knock. 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 Jacob's chest tightened. He spun back, yanked the door open. No1. The gravel lot stretched under the moonlight. His car sat where he left it. Nothing moved, but when he looked down, his stomach turned to ice. There were footprints. Bare feet, pressed into the dust right outside his door. The prints led up to the threshold, then stopped. No prints going away. As though someone had come to his room and never left. Jacob slammed the door shut, locked it, and shoved the chain into place. His pulse thundered in his ears. He told himself he was just tired, that he was imagining things. He switched off the lamp and lay back on the bed, but as his eyes adjusted to the dark, he realized something. The bedspread beneath him felt warm. As if someone else had been lying there, just moments before. Jacob lay stiff on the bed, every muscle wound tight. He didn't dare move, not with that lingering heat beneath him, as if someone else's body had only just left. He told himself it was the springs, the insulation, some trick of the old room. But deep down, he didn't believe it. His breathing slowed until he could hear the faintest sounds in the silence. The soft hum of the neon outside. The occasional groan of the building, wood and metal shifting with age. And something else, something so faint he thought it might have been his imagination. A whisper, not words, exactly. More like the sound of breath moving where no one should be breathing. Jacob shot upright, heart hammering. The room was empty. The chair, the small dresser, the crooked picture on the wall, nothing had changed. Yet the air felt thicker now, harder to swallow. He glanced toward the bathroom door. It stood slightly ajar, and in a thin slit of darkness behind it, something shifted. Hello. His voice cracked, too loud in the stillness. No answer. Just the slow creak of the door as it drifted open, inch by inch, until it revealed only a shadowed space. Jacob stood, forcing himself forward. His legs trembled, but he told himself he wouldn't sit there and let his mind unravel. He reached the bathroom, flicked the light on. The cracked mirror reflected his pale face, eyes wide with tension. The sink was stained, the tiles discolored. Empty, but the shower curtain was drawn. Jacob reached out, grabbed the fabric, and yanked it aside. Nothing. Just the tub, chipped and dry. He sagged with relief, then turned off the light and stepped back into the main room. That was when he noticed the ledger paper. It lay on the nightstand, though he was sure he hadn't brought it in. The yellowed sheet, torn from the check-in book, sat neatly folded. Jacob's name was written there in ink, but beneath it, in darker strokes, someone had scrawled 3 words, "Do not stay." His stomach clenched. He snatched the paper up, scanning the corners of the room. The blinds were drawn tight, but for the first time, he noticed how thin they were. If someone stood outside, they could watch everything that he backed away, pulse racing, until his leg hit the bed. That was when the lamp flickered. Once. Twice. Then it went out completely, plunging the room into darkness. The hum of the neon sign was gone, too. The world outside was silent. Jacob's breath came fast and shallow. He reached for his phone, fumbling it from his pocket. The screen lit up, and he nearly dropped it. The reflection in the screen wasn't his. For just a second, he saw another face. Hollow eyes. A mouth stretched too wide in a grin that had no warmth in it. Then it was gone. His own reflection stared back at him, panicked and pale. The knocking started again. This time, it wasn't at the door. It was inside the walls. Thud. 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 It came from behind the headboard, then the dresser, then the bathroom wall. Like someone trapped on the other side, pounding for release. Jacob staggered back, gripping the phone like a weapon. The screen flickered. The time changed, 1:17 a.m., the same minute he had first heard the knock at the door. And it didn't move forward. The seconds didn't tick. His phone had frozen, locked at that same cursed moment. Jacob's throat tightened. He bolted for the door, ripping the chain free and fumbling with the lock. He yanked it open. The hallway stretched out before him, but it wasn't the same. The doors were gone. The numbers. The peeling paint. Now, the corridor seemed endless, walls narrowing, ceiling sagging lower. The light flickered red, then dimmed into shadows that moved like they were alive. Behind him, the room's door slammed shut. Jacob's only option was forward. His footsteps echoed strangely, as though the floor itself was hollow. He glanced back once, just once, and saw room 7's door again, though now the brass number was upside down. He kept walking, the hallway twisted, turning corners that shouldn't exist. He passed door after door, each one slightly ajar. And from each came sounds, low voices, murmurs of people he couldn't see. A woman's sob. A man's laughter, too sharp, too sudden. The scrape of nails against wood. He moved faster. At last, he saw another neon glow ahead, faint and flickering. He stumbled toward it, desperate, until the corridor opened into the motel lobby again. The woman was still behind the counter. Her red lipstick, her hair, her pale face unchanged. She looked up as if nothing unusual had happened. Problem with the room? She asked. Jacob's chest heaved as he tried to speak. There's something in there. The knocking. The writing. He shoved the folded paper toward her. She glanced down at it, then smiled faintly. Not all guests read the warnings, she said, her voice calm, rehearsed, exactly the same as before. But that's why checkout is at sunrise. Jacob stared at her, cold realization creeping into his bones. This wasn't an accident. This place, this motel, wasn't just old and strange. It was deliberate. A trap, and he had just checked in. Alex pushed the door open to room 6, the key cold and unyielding in his hand. The room smelled faintly of mildew and something metallic, a scent that made the back of his throat tighten. At first glance, it looked ordinary, a single bed with a stiff white sheet, a nightstand, a small dresser, and a faded lamp that flickered with every surge of the storm outside. Yet something felt off. The rain pattered against the window, but inside, the air was heavy and thick. As he set his suitcase down, the floorboards groaned under his weight in a way that seemed almost deliberate, like the room itself was aware of him. He pulled out his phone to check the time, but the screen blinked and went black, then briefly displayed a date decades in the past before returning to normal. A cold shiver ran down his spine. Sitting on the edge of the bed, Alex tried to convince himself it was nothing. Old motels had quirks. Maybe it was the storm. Maybe he was just tired. But then he noticed the mirror above the dresser. Its surface rippled slightly, as if it were water. He leaned closer. The fog began to gather almost instantly, even though he hadn't breathed on it. Words slowly appeared, scratched into the condensation, "Don't stay." Alex blinked, leaning closer, reaching a trembling finger toward the message. The letters faded under his touch, leaving only a blur of fog. His heart pounded. He told himself it was a prank, an old trick from a previous guest. But there was no one else here. He was alone, wasn't he? The storm outside grew louder. Thunder shook the windows, and lightning illuminated the room in stark flashes. Each flash seemed to stretch the shadows longer, darker. For a moment, Alex thought he saw movement in the corners of the room, a shadow that didn't belong to him. He spun around. Nothing. Trying to steady his breathing, he sat on the bed and unpacked his bag. As he did, water dripped steadily from the ceiling onto the carpet. Not the ceiling light, just the ceiling itself. No rain had come through the window. He traced the droplets upward. The source was a small, rusted crack near the far corner, but the water felt icy cold, colder than the storm outside that he checked the room's lock on the door. Secure. Yet a low hum seemed to vibrate from the walls, almost like whispers beneath the storm. At first, he thought it was his imagination, a product of isolation and exhaustion. Then he heard it clearly, soft, murmured words, impossible to make out but undeniably human. The hum grew louder, almost rhythmic. It pulsed with the flicker of the lamp, as if the room itself were breathing in sync with him. Alex's pulse quickened. Something was here. Something aware of him that he approached the window to look outside. The neon sign glowed through the rain, Vacancy, Midnight Motel. Its light reflected strangely on the wet pavement, stretching like long, molten fingers. Alex felt a pang of dread. The parking lot below was empty. No cars. No footprints. Nothing moved, yet the air felt, watched. Turning back to the room, he noticed the dresser drawers were slightly ajar, though he hadn't touched them. Inside, he found old objects, a cracked photograph of a family long gone, a pocket watch frozen at 3:17, and a small guestbook page torn from the past, its ink faded but legible. A single name stood out, someone who had checked in decades ago, yet whose handwriting was unnervingly familiar. Alex shook his head. Impossible. Then the mirror caught his attention again. His reflection looked wrong. His eyes were darkened, hollow, shadows stretching unnaturally beneath them. He blinked, and it was gone. The reflection now showed him as he truly was, but the room behind him seemed to pulse, walls stretching subtly, doors where there were none. That a sudden knock on the door made him jump. Twice. 3 times. Slow, deliberate. No voice called his name, no words, just the knock. Heart hammering, Alex approached and looked through the peephole. Nothing. The hallway stretched empty, longer than it should have been. He leaned in closer, and the walls seemed to warp. A faint whisper came through the wood, "Leave, or stay forever." Panicking, he grabbed his suitcase. The hum in the walls grew louder, almost unbearable, like it was pressing against his ears. Shadows in the corners of the room shifted, forming shapes that looked human, or at least, human enough to be recognized. Their faces were blurred, eyes glowing faintly red, staring at him from the edges of perception. He backed into the bed, tripping over his own feet. The storm outside reached a crescendo. Lightning flashed again, and for a fleeting second, Alex saw the room differently. The walls were charred, peeling, blackened as though a fire had once consumed the space. The bed was scorched, the mirror cracked, yet the furniture remained intact, pristine. A fire that had never ended, the lights flickered violently, then went out completely. Alex fumbled for his phone, it was dead. Darkness pressed in from every angle, thick, suffocating. The whispers became clearer, more urgent. They were chanting, almost welcoming, yet threatening, "Don't stay, stay, don't stay." Alex screamed, a raw sound of fear, but it seemed muffled, distant. The shadows on the walls writhed, reaching toward him, and the mirror fogged once again. Slowly, the letters formed again, this time larger, more insistent, "Don't stay, or you will never leave." The lamp flickered one last time, casting the room in brief, horrifying clarity. Alex saw the shadow of a figure standing silently in the far corner, watching him. Then the light went out, all that remained was the storm, the whispers, and the unmistakable feeling that room 6 wanted him. Alex's heart was still racing when he stepped into the hallway outside room 6. The storm had quieted just enough that he could hear his own footsteps, but the silence only made the air heavier, thicker, as if the motel itself was holding its breath. The carpet was threadbare, damp in places though the walls were dry, and the lights flickered sporadically, casting long, wavering shadows that didn't match the shape of the fixtures. That he turned right, thinking to get to the lobby, but the hallway seemed longer than it should have been. Each door he passed looked identical, peeling paint and brass numbers glinting in the flickering light. He tried to remember which way he had come, but the layout twisted subtly, impossible to track. The exit felt further away with every step. A soft whisper floated from somewhere nearby. Alex froze. His name was barely audible, Alex. It wasn't on the storm outside. It wasn't in his mind. It was coming from the hallway. He stepped forward, calling out, but his voice sounded strange, echoing oddly, as if swallowed and spat back by the wall's point. One of the doors ahead was slightly ajar, though he was sure it had been closed before. Beyond the gap, the darkness was thick, almost tangible, but something moved inside. A shadow shifted against the far wall, quick and fleeting. Alex's instincts screamed at him to run, yet curiosity and fear pushed him closer. He reached out to the doorknob. Cold. Ice cold. He flinched, then noticed a faint reflection in the hallway mirror across from the door, a figure standing behind him. Heart pounding, he spun around. Nothing. just the empty hall stretching endlessly. The reflection, though, remained. Eyes dark, hollow, following him with unnatural patience, the whispering returned, louder, more insistent. Hundreds of voices, overlapping, echoing in impossible patterns. Stay, stay, don't leave, stay. Alex stumbled backward, bumping into another door. It swung open on its own, revealing a room he hadn't seen before. Inside, the furniture was frozen mid-motion, chairs tipped over, sheets hovering as though invisible hands had thrown them. Shadows pooled in the corners, shifting and twisting. From the far wall, a faint light glimmered, illuminating a figure of a man hunched over a desk, scribbling furiously in a notebook. Alex called out, but the figure didn't look up. The whispers drowned his voice that he ran back into the hallway. The walls seemed to pulse now, subtly breathing, expanding and contracting as though the corridor itself were alive. Every step he took seemed to stretch the hallway further. The doors multiplied. Where there had been a single number before, new doors now appeared, their brass numbers unrecognizable, some inverted, some scratched out entirely. He tried to keep count, tried to find room 6 again, but the hallways were labyrinthine, a trap without visible walls. From somewhere far down the corridor came the sound of footsteps, deliberate, slow, measured. Not his own. They echoed, then multiplied, until it sounded like dozens of people were pacing behind him. Alex ran, trying to escape, yet every turn led him back to the same hallway. The flickering lights cast shadows that elongated and warped, stretching along the walls and ceiling, following him, mocking him that he tried the doors, banging on each one, but they wouldn't open. Some were locked, others led to rooms that didn't exist, hallways within hallways, each more distorted than the last. One door swung open to reveal a mirror reflecting a hallway that should have been behind him, yet it was different, older, burned, scorched. The wallpaper was torn, the carpet blackened. And at the end of that mirrored corridor stood dozens of figures, faces obscured by shadows, their mouths moving silently as they whispered, "You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be here." Alex stumbled backward, nearly falling. Panic surged. He tried to scream, but only a low, strangled sound emerged. His footsteps were frantic, yet the hallway seemed infinite, stretching forever in both directions. Each door he passed whispered warnings, the numbers morphing into symbols he didn't understand, symbols that pulsed faintly like veins in the walls. The air grew thick, hot, and suffocating, smelling faintly of smoke and burnt fabric. Alex could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He realized he wasn't alone, never had been. The walls themselves seemed to hum with life, vibrating with faint voices of guests long gone. He caught glimpses of figures in the corners of his eyes, a child sitting on a bed that shouldn't exist, a woman staring through a window with hollow eyes, a man in a suit hunched unnaturally, frozen mid-step. Each figure disappeared when he turned to look directly at it, and then the whispers grew clearer, distinct, almost intelligible. We waited, now you will wait." Alex ran blindly, following the echoes, chasing the exit that seemed just out of reach. He tried to remember the layout, the turns he had taken, but the hallway mocked him, looping back into itself. The same flickering lights, the same cracked doors, the same pulsing walls. He realized the motel wasn't just a building, it was alive, aware, feeding on him, and the hallway was its trap, lightning flashed outside a window at the far end. For a fleeting moment, Alex saw the lobby beyond it. Relief surged, freedom was near. He sprinted toward the window, but the hallway stretched again, longer than he could fathom. Doors opened along the walls, revealing glimpses of previous guests, frozen in time, eyes glowing faintly red, mouths moving in silent screams. The whispers intensified, overlapping with the sound of his own panicked breath. Alex reached the far end, grasped the doorknob, and wrenched it open. The lobby lay before him, unchanged, welcoming, yet somehow different. The front desk clerk was there, smiling faintly, holding the guest book. Alex froze, realizing with a sickening clarity that this hallway, this motel, had been expecting him, and from somewhere behind him, the echoes whispered one final warning: there is no leaving. Alex stumbled back into the lobby, his lungs burning, sweat running down his face despite the chill in the air. The front desk clerk's smile was calm, almost serene, but the eyes, they were different. Deep, endless, as if they had seen everything that had ever happened here. Alex tried to speak, to ask a question, but his voice caught in his throat. The clerk handed him the guest book without a word. Alex opened it, flipping through the pages. Names stretched back decades, hundreds of entries. Some were dated only days ago, others from the 1970s, 1960s, even earlier. Every page held a strange familiarity, as if the motel itself had written them, recording every guest who had ever entered, and never left. Then Alex noticed a clipping tucked between the pages. It was yellowed, edges brittle. His eyes widened as he read the headline: Midnight Motel burns down, 1973, all guests lost. The paper crumbled slightly in his hands. The room felt warmer now, the air heavy with smoke. Alex glanced around. The lobby was intact, unchanged, but through the flickering lights, he saw subtle hints of fire, charred edges along the baseboards, wallpaper curling as if scorched by heat, a faint smell of smoke lingering in the air. His heart pounded that he dropped the newspaper and looked back at the clerk. I don't understand. The motel burned down decades ago. How? The clerk raised a hand, silencing him. A low hum began to fill the room, vibrating through the walls and floors. Alex's eyes darted around. Shadows moved independently of the light, flickering like flames without source. His reflection in the lobby mirror was distorted, twisted with streaks of black soot and red, glowing embers. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed from the hallway. Alex spun toward it. The walls themselves seemed to shimmer and bend, revealing glimpses of a past fire, flames licking at the carpet, smoke curling in unnatural swirls, guests trapped inside rooms, faces frozen in terror. Their eyes, empty, hollow, stared directly at him. And yet, when he looked again, the hallway was normal, mundane, as if nothing had happened. The heat increased. Beads of sweat ran down his forehead. He could feel it pressing on his skin, burning without pain, suffocating without smoke. Every step he took toward the front door felt like wading through a wall of invisible flame. The motel was alive, feeding on his fear, growing stronger with every heartbeat. Alex tried to open the exit, but it resisted, as if fused to the building itself. He looked around frantically. The lobby furniture was unchanged, but shadows pooled unnaturally beneath the tables and chairs. Faint whispers drifted through the air, overlapping with the crackle of flames he could see only in his mind's eye. He ran to the nearest door, flinging it open. A guest room stretched before him, untouched by the fire he imagined. But inside, the walls were painted in hues of smoke and ash, the bed scorched as though someone had once lain on it and been consumed. On the dresser lay a pocket watch, stopped at 3:17, the same time the fire had claimed the motel. Alex reached for it. The metal was searing hot, almost impossible to touch. Then he heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping. Footsteps. Heartbeats. A single voice calling out from behind the walls, "You cannot leave, it never ends, you are ours." Alex spun around. Through the doorway, he glimpsed other guests, families, couples, children. Their faces were pale, etched with smoke-streaked tears, eyes glowing faintly red. They moved slowly, eerily, as if trapped in an endless replay of the fire that had taken them. One by one, they turned to face him, mouths moving soundlessly, whispering, "Stay, stay, stay." Panic surged. Alex ran down the hallway, past room after room. Each was a snapshot of horror, a burnt bed, a charred mirror, a frozen figure mid-scream. And yet, when he glanced back, the hallway appeared ordinary, pristine, unscathed. The motel itself was a living paradox, fire and preservation existing simultaneously, a loop of death without end. He reached the lobby again, gasping for breath. The clerk smiled knowingly, placing the guest book on the counter. Alex's eyes were drawn to the last page. His name was written there, ink still wet, penstrokes trembling as though alive. He hadn't signed it. He couldn't have. Yet the page confirmed what his gut already knew. He was now part of the motel, another entry in a ledger of souls claimed by the fire that never ended. The temperature rose sharply. The lights flickered and dimmed, and in the shadows, he saw them again, the original guests, trapped in perpetual torment, faces distorted by smoke and firelight, reaching for him. The whispers intensified, swirling together into a deafening chant, "Join us, stay with the fire forever." Alex stumbled backward, heart hammering. He realized the motel was not just a building, it was a living memory of its own destruction, a cage of fire and shadow, collecting everyone who dared enter. The neon sign outside flashed violently, "Vacancy," then black, then flickering again, "No vacancy." The clerk leaned forward, eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Welcome," he said softly. "You're finally home." Alex screamed, a sound swallowed instantly by the walls. The air thickened, the smoke intensified, and the lobby seemed to pulse with the heat of 1,000 lost souls. The fire never ended. It never would. And Alex understood, with chilling clarity, that he had checked into a motel where the past and present burned together, trapping every guest in its eternal inferno. Alex stumbled down the hallway, lungs burning, sweat running down his face despite the chill. The heat of the eternal fire from the motel's hidden past pressed against him from every direction. The whispers from the walls had grown louder, turning into murmurs of recognition, echoing memories he didn't want to recall. He could feel the weight of the motel's history pressing in, its every heartbeat synchronized with his own panic, and then he saw them. Figures began to appear at the edges of the hallway, ghostly, pale, shimmering like smoke in dim light. At first, he thought his mind was fracturing. But as he drew closer, they solidified. A couple holding hands, their fingers fused as though burned together, a child clutching a worn, ragged stuffed bear, eyes hollow yet pleading, a man in a suit, tie tattered and singed, staring at Alex with an intensity that made him stumble backward. The first figure spoke, voice soft, almost melancholic, yet carrying the weight of eternity. "You shouldn't have checked in." Alex's chest tightened. He backed away, but the figures multiplied, emerging from the shadows, corners, and doors themselves. Families, travelers, children, some familiar from the torn photographs and guestbook pages he had glimpsed earlier, others entirely new, their faces pale and eyes glowing faintly red. Each face held the same expression, sorrow, warning, and a hunger he couldn't comprehend. The child approached, small fingers reaching out. Alex flinched, but the child's eyes were sorrowful, almost pleading. "Don't leave," the child whispered. And Alex realized it wasn't comfort, it was inevitability. The motel wanted him. Every step he took down the hallway was mirrored by another corridor, stretching infinitely, twisting and folding like living tissue. The floorboards creaked in unnatural harmony with his heartbeat. Every door along the hallway opened and closed on its own, revealing brief glimpses of past horrors: a woman screaming silently in a smoke-filled room, a man frozen mid-step, reaching for an exit that would never appear, shadows of flames licking walls that should have crumbled decades ago. Alex's breathing became ragged. The walls themselves seemed to pulse, as though the motel was alive. The other guests weren't just warnings, they were extensions of its will, keeping him trapped in a loop of fear. One couple stepped closer, lips moving silently. Alex somehow heard them in his mind. "There is no escape. The motel wants you. Stay with us," he stumbled, tripping over the threadbare carpet. When he looked up, dozens of figures now crowded the hallway, eyes fixed on him, faces twisted with sorrow and longing. Some had mouths open, whispering words he could not hear, yet their intent was clear. He would become one of them if he failed to escape. Alex ran, dodging the figures, trying to reach the lobby, trying to reach the exit, but the building had changed. Hallways twisted, doors shifted, and the flickering lights made it impossible to track his steps. The motel itself was alive, feeding on fear, shaping the corridors to trap him. Through the chaos, he glimpsed the neon sign outside the lobby windows, "Vacancy." Relief surged. He sprinted toward it, but the sign flickered violently, transforming into "No vacancy." The letters burned into his vision, and Alex realized with crushing certainty that the motel's promise of escape was an illusion. One figure, a man in a charred suit, stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "You belong here now," the figure said softly, voice layered with smoke and ash. The other guests circled him, their presence suffocating, a tide of lost souls pressing in. Alex tried to push past, but the hallway stretched and warped, looping back on itself. Every turn led him back to the same group, the same faces, the same whispers: "Stay, join us. You cannot leave." Alex's mind raced. He remembered the guest book, the names, the newspaper clipping, the fire that never ended. Each detail of the motel's past was now a living, breathing reality around him. These other guests weren't just warnings, they were his future if he failed to escape. A child tugged at his sleeve. "It's okay," the small voice said, hollow, yet gentle. You can stay, forever. Alex recoiled, realizing the child wasn't offering comfort. It was offering inevitability. The fire, the smoke, the infinite halls, the whispers, they were all part of the same truth. The motel consumed everyone who entered, feeding off their fear, keeping them trapped in its eternal echo. Alex turned to run again, but the hallway shifted beneath his feet. Doors appeared where there had been none. Corridors twisted in impossible angles. The figures followed him silently, circling closer, whispering in unison, "Don't leave, don't leave, you belong here." He stumbled into a room, slamming the door behind him. The walls shimmered with heat, the ceiling rippled like water, and shadows danced across the floor as if alive. Beads of sweat ran down his face, but the room felt unnaturally cold. Through the window, the neon sign glimmered like a cruel beacon, "Vacancy," then flickering violently, "No vacancy." The whispers outside grew louder, almost deafening. "Stay, stay, join us." Hundreds of voices overlapping, indistinguishable yet inescapable. Alex pressed himself against the far wall, chest heaving, and realized with chilling clarity that he was no longer just a visitor. He was now part of the motel's story, another soul waiting in the corridors of smoke and fire, another guest whose name would one day appear in the guest book. Ink still wet, the figures pressed closer, eyes glowing, faces sorrowful yet insistent. One by one, they reached for him, hands cold as ice, whispers insistent. The fire and smoke, the infinite halls, the looping corridors, they were all part of the same reality. There was no escape. The Midnight Motel claimed all who entered, and its other guests were living proof of its power, its hunger. Alex's legs gave out, and he fell to the carpet, panting. The figures surrounded him, circling, whispering. The child knelt in front of him, eyes bright with firelight. "You can stay," it whispered. "Forever." Alex screamed, a raw, animal sound, but it was swallowed instantly by the walls, by the chorus of lost voices, by the motel itself. He realized then the horrifying truth: the other guests were not trying to help him. They were part of the motel, extensions of its will, and they would not allow him to leave. He was trapped. Alex bolted from the hallway, his lungs burning, heart hammering like a drum in his chest. The motel's corridors stretched endlessly before him, doors multiplying and twisting, the flickering lights casting shadows that seemed to follow him. The whispers of the other guests, soft at first, now a deafening chorus, echoed from every wall. "Stay, stay, stay." Every turn he took led him back to the lobby, back to the front desk, back to the same faces, the same hollow eyes. The clerk's smile never faltered. Alex realized with a surge of horror that the motel's layout was alive, a labyrinth designed to trap him. The exit was never where it seemed. He stumbled into the lobby again. The neon sign outside flashed, alternately vacancy, then no vacancy. Relief flared for a split second, then vanished. The doors to the outside appeared real, tangible, yet when he pushed one open, he found himself back in the hallway. It stretched endlessly, twisting, folding, a living maze mocking his desperation. Alex's mind raced. He had to get out. He had to leave. Every instinct screamed to run, yet his legs were heavy, as if the building itself weighed them down. Behind him, whispers multiplied. Figures emerged from the corners, children, families, travelers long gone, their eyes glowing faintly red, their faces sorrowful yet insistent. They moved toward him silently, shadows merging with the flickering light that he sprinted down another corridor, past rooms that seemed normal at first glance, only to reveal horrors within. One door swung open to a room frozen in the middle of a fire, charred beds, walls blackened with smoke, a clock stopped at 3:17. Another opened to a dining area filled with tables, set neatly as if a family had only just left, yet the chairs were scorched, and the air smelled of ash. Each glimpse reminded him that the motel's history wasn't just past, it was alive, repeating, feeding. Alex skidded around a corner and found himself in the parking lot. Relief surged. He could see the storm raging overhead, rain slashing against the neon sign, Vacancy, Midnight Motel. He sprinted toward his car, fumbling with the keys. Heart in his throat, he jumped inside and started the engine. The tires spun, splashing puddles, and the neon reflected violently on the wet asphalt. For a moment, freedom seemed possible, then he realized the truth. No matter which direction he drove, the lot looped back on itself. Turn left, back at the sign. Turn right, back at the sign. Forward, still the sign. Every path was the same. The motel had trapped him not just inside its walls, but in its very space. Every inch of the outside was a mirror of the inside, another loop in its endless nightmare that he slammed the car door and ran on foot, trying the edge of the lot, hoping for some road leading away, some highway to break the cycle. But the rain was heavier now, blinding, thunder booming overhead. The neon sign flickered violently, the word vacancy stretching into impossibility before snapping back to no vacancy. Shadows appeared in the puddles at his feet, reaching upward like black fingers, writhing toward him. Alex's scream was swallowed by the storm. The figures appeared again, not just inside the halls but now outside as well. Travelers from decades past emerged from the shadows of cars, from behind street lamps, from the darkened edges of the lot. Their eyes glowed red in the rain, faces sorrowful yet intent. They whispered, all at once, "You belong here, you cannot leave." He tried the car again, starting it, slamming it in reverse. The tires splashed through waterlogged asphalt, but the lot bent impossibly. Curves twisted the horizon, parking spaces appeared where none had been, and the edges of the lot seemed to bleed into the darkness, looping back to the motel entrance. The storm intensified, thunder shaking the ground, lightning illuminating the wet asphalt in jagged, surreal flashes. Alex realized he was being toyed with. The motel's power wasn't just inside, it controlled everything around it. It was a living entity, bending the real world to its will. Every escape attempt brought him closer, always, to the same place. The neon sign, flickering like a heartbeat, glared at him, no vacancy. He ran again, and this time he abandoned the car, sprinting through the lot. The rain soaked him, chilling to the bone, but the fire from the motel's past seemed to burn in his chest. Shadows reached for him from every side, whispers growing to a roar. Stay, 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 stay. He tripped, falling into a puddle, and for a brief moment, the water reflected a horrifying truth. The lot was infinite, the storm eternal, and the motel loomed above all, impossibly tall, neon glowing, windows dark like hollow eyes. And in the puddle, he saw not his reflection, but the other guests, their eyes glowing, mouths moving silently, waiting for him to surrender. Alex scrambled to his feet, desperation fueling him. He ran blindly, taking every turn, hoping against reason that somehow, some way, he would break the cycle. But the lot twisted and folded, the rain became blinding, and the neon sign mocked him with its flicker. Vacancy. No vacancy. Vacancy. No vacancy. He realized, finally, that escape wasn't about finding the exit. The motel had already claimed him. Every scream, every footstep, every heartbeat had been anticipated. The fire that never ended, the other guests, the looping lot, they were all part of a single truth. The Midnight Motel never let go. Alex's legs gave out. He fell to the wet asphalt, chest heaving, eyes locked on the neon sign. The other guests closed in, their whispers a chorus of inevitability. He understood then that he had not failed to escape, escape had never existed. He had checked in, and now he was trapped. Forever, the storm raged on. The lot looped endlessly. And the neon sign, flickering violently above, seemed to pulse with life. No vacancy. Alex collapsed to his knees in the endless wet asphalt of the parking lot, rain soaking his clothes, hair plastered to his face. The neon sign loomed above him, flickering violently. No vacancy. Vacancy. No vacancy. His chest heaved with exhaustion, terror, and disbelief. Every path he had taken, every desperate turn, had led him back here. The motel was alive, a trap beyond comprehension, and he was its newest prey. The storm raged with unrelenting fury. Thunder cracked overhead, and the wind whipped sheets of rain across his face. Shadows moved in the lot, figures emerging from corners, behind cars, from the darkness itself. Children, families, travelers long lost, all with eyes glowing faintly red, faces etched with sorrow and warning. They didn't approach him threateningly. No, they moved with purpose, calm inevitability, as if guiding him back to the truth he had fought so hard to ignore. Alex stumbled to his feet, trying to flee. His every step seemed heavy, dragging him back toward the motel's entrance. Each puddle he splashed through reflected not his own face, but the faces of the other guests, mouths moving silently in unison. Stay, stay, stay. Through the rain, the lobby door glowed faintly, beckoning. He ran. Every instinct screamed to keep moving, to escape, to fight. He reached the steps leading to the door, but the handle was ice cold in his hands. His fingers trembled as he turned it, the door creaking open to reveal the lobby as it had always been, pristine, welcoming, unchanged, yet suffused with a quiet, terrible awareness. Inside, the clerk stood behind the counter, smiling, guestbook in hand. Alex froze. Every line of the clerk's face was calm, knowing, endless. The neon glow from outside filtered through the windows, painting the lobby in alternating flashes of vacancy and no vacancy. Alex's chest heaved. His eyes were drawn involuntarily to the guestbook. The last page bore his name, written in ink still wet, pen strokes trembling as if alive. He hadn't signed it. He couldn't have. And yet, there it was, confirming what his mind refused to accept. He was already part of the motel's ledger, another soul claimed by the fire that never ended. the whispers from the other guests followed him into the lobby, growing louder, forming a chorus of inevitability. Children, families, travelers, all staring at him with hollow eyes, reached out, their movements slow, deliberate. Their voices layered together in unison. "You belong here. You cannot leave. Stay with us forever." Alex backed away, heart hammering, but the walls seemed to pulse with the same rhythm as his own terrified heartbeat. The motel's life, its consciousness, pressured him from every angle. Each flicker of the lights, each shadow in the corner, every echo of thunder from outside reminded him that escape had never been possible. He stumbled toward the front desk. The clerk's smile never faltered. "Welcome," the clerk said softly. "You're finally home." The words seemed to vibrate through the lobby itself. Alex tried to speak, tried to protest, but his voice was swallowed by the building. The neon sign outside pulsed in violent rhythm, reflecting in the wet tiles, "No vacancy. No vacancy. No vacancy." The other guests closed in around him, forming a semicircle. Their whispers overlapped, indistinguishable yet unmistakable in intent. The child from the lot knelt before him, eyes glowing like embers. "It's okay," the child said, voice hollow, soothing. "You can stay, forever." Alex realized with bone-deep dread that there was no malice in the words, only certainty. The motel didn't threaten, it collected. He tried to flee again, but the lobby seemed to expand and contract around him. Walls stretched, hallways warped, the ceiling pulsed like the chest of a living creature. Every exit led him back to the same point, the same reality. The motel had absorbed all attempts at escape, folding space and time around him. Alex sank to the floor, chest heaving, eyes wide, staring at the guest book. Names blurred, past and present intermingled, all entries alive with subtle movement. Pages rustled though there was no wind, ink shimmered as if wet. And at the very bottom, beneath the pages of decades, his name glowed faintly, written in letters that trembled like living things. The whispers intensified, becoming a roar in his head. "Stay, stay, stay, stay." He closed his eyes, tears mingling with rainwater that clung to his face, and realized the truth he had resisted. He had checked in too late. The motel's fire that never ended, the other guests, the looping hallways, the impossible parking lot, they were all extensions of its will, and its will was absolute. Resistance was meaningless. Escape was impossible. Alex opened his eyes. The lobby stretched endlessly, filled with the faint glow of red-eyed figures. The clerk held the guest book out to him. Slowly, mechanically, Alex reached forward, touching the pen. Ink bled onto his fingers, wet and warm. He was signing, and yet it wasn't voluntary. It was inevitable. A final flash of lightning illuminated the lobby in stark clarity. The other guests standing silently, watching, waiting, some smiling faintly, some weeping silently. Outside, the neon sign pulsed, flickering violently, "No vacancy." The storm roared, thunder echoing like the heartbeat of the motel itself, and then the world went quiet. Alex's scream was gone. His struggle ended. He was a guest of the Midnight Motel, bound to its endless halls, the fire that never ended, and the whispers of all those who had come before him. The lobby was still, the neon sign flickering outside. "No vacancy." The clerk closed the guest book gently, a satisfied smile on their face. Somewhere in the darkness, Footsteps echoed softly, a new whisper carried by the walls. Another one has checked in. The storm raged on outside. The motel waited. Forever.